Welcome to the Victor Revices podcast, brought to you commercial-free by addictionhelp.com. I am your host, Dan Hauser, and today I sit down with Chipper Keener to talk everything happening in the world of golf, including the Florida Swing, Season 2 of Full Swing on Netflix, and we'll preview the season's first major, the Masters. Let's get into the show. All right, so as I teased off the top, I am joined today by Chipper Keener. For those of you who are regular listeners and followers of the show, you may remember Chipper from a couple episodes ago. Him and I sat down to talk shortly after the Waste Management Phoenix Open about everything that transpired there and the total just mess that happened out at that tournament earlier this year. Chipper, thanks for coming back and joining us. Today's going to be a little bit more fun of a conversation, so thanks for coming back.
Yeah, we'll keep it to golf and actually talking about that stuff.
Yeah, we're going to keep it a little lighter today. So for those of you who are thinking to yourself, oh, God, here we go again. No, it's okay. You don't have to fast forward or skip this one. This one's going to be a little bit more fun. For those of you that did not catch the first time Chipper was on, episode 12, go back and listen to it. Quick recap. At the Waste Management Phoenix Open, I think we've all seen it by now. You know, everyone got drunk and stupid and sloppy, and it reached a point where they actually had to close the gates on Saturday. They had to cut off alcohol sales. The organizers of the event, the Thunderbirds, actually had to come out and basically say, hey, yeah, this isn't going to cut it anymore. This doesn't work. We're definitely going to have to sit down and reevaluate how we want to move forward with this tournament from a fan experience side starting next year. So that's kind of where we're at now. I do find it interesting, just really quick before we get into the more lighthearted stuff. While the organizers of the tournament Phoenix, the Thunderbirds, have specifically come out and said, yeah, hey, we need to do something about this. Nobody else really has. In fact, since then, I think it might have even been during the airing of the conversation that the Golf Channel had with the head of the Thunderbirds. They were running commercials for the players and basically like encouraging everyone to come out and enjoy the party-like atmosphere of the players, including the concerts leading up to Thursday, and then the party-like atmosphere that happens around 17. I know that obviously there was still the party-like atmospheres here around the Cognizant, formerly the Honda. If you hear me say Honda, I'm referring to the Cognizant, vice versa. It's tough after all these years to not just instinctively say the Honda. But so for both the PGA Tour and, of course, LIV, they still do seem to be kind of hammering home, if you will, that party-like atmosphere at their tournaments. LIV even more so. They actually have DJs and music playing on tee boxes, which to me, that I'll never understand that one. But hey, to each their own on that one. Once again, I know the Florida Swing is unique, and we're going to get much deeper into the Florida Swing as a whole here in a second. It's unique because this time of year is obviously spring break for a lot of the country, so you do have a lot of people down here from out of town. You also have spring training going on too, so I understand from the tourist perspective of saying, hey, all of you who may be down in Florida for non-golf related reasons, whether you're here for spring break or spring training or just to enjoy some fun in the sun, we have golf tournaments going on. Come check those out as well, too. So I get it to an extent, but I did find it interesting, at least over the last couple of weeks, that while the Phoenix Open was like, yeah, we need to do something and change this, the tour overall has not kind of had that same sentiment yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a place where the spring break vibe is definitely something that is coming into the Florida Swing, like you said. And I think that, people are just excited to be out in the sun. The weather's a little bit nicer. I mean, Saturday at the Players, I think it was mid-80s. And, a week prior, it was in the 50s. So, people were out and getting sun and having fun. And, that's okay to an extent. I think the history of golf, and if you're a golf traditionalist like you and I both are, it just kind of takes away from the formality of things. And I know that the guys on tour, while a lot of them like to go out and have a good time, when they're in between the ropes, man, it's their job. And it's unlike any other sport because no one else, I would say the closest any other fans could get would be baseball or hockey. And hockey, you're behind glass, and baseball, there's even the entire area of foul.
Basketball, if you have courtside seats, you may be sitting next to the player. But
But
that's such a small number of people, and only certain people can even afford that. Whereas anyone can basically afford a ticket to a golf event.
Right.
Essentially,
You can pay $100 and be 5 feet from Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, Justin Thomas, and say whatever you want to them and think that you're going to get away with it. So it's a level of entitlement, in my opinion, is kind of what's happening. I spent this money, I get to do whatever I want.
It's both a blessing and a curse because it's one of the coolest things about golf if you're a golf fan, but it also is one of the biggest issues amongst the pros is that there's really not a ton of separation there. And I think it's a big reason why we started to see more and more of the more big name guys, the Tigers, the Rorys of the world. They now tend to have police details following with them along with their caddy and all the TV people and everyone else, because, there is that kind of extra layer of protection needed when you have people with the ability to be so close to you.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a fair decision by those types of people. I mean, Tigers and Rorys are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And, I would probably have security wherever I went if I was worth that kind of money too. So, to each their own. But I do think just in terms of, we touched on it in the last podcast, but there are more golf fans than golf traditionalists today, which means that the people that are going out and rooting and enjoying their time and following players or not following players, they may not understand what golf etiquette is all about. And I think that that's a big, don't talk in somebody's backswing. Don't move when somebody's lining up a putt. Don't, put your phones away. Like, just in general, I think people could use their phones less, but especially like when you see the people that are they're holding their phone up to make sure they get a picture of whoever so that they can post it to social media. And it's like, okay, well, I actually saw Tom Segura at a sidebar. I saw him Friday before I went to the Players Saturday. And you're not allowed to use your phones at the comedy show. And he literally does, like, he has a pre-recorded intro to his set. And he's like, use your mind to remember what you saw, and it will stay with you forever. And it was hilarious because, the comedians are all about that. And I think it could be a thing with golf. Like, we could go back to not having phones, and it wouldn't decrease the drinking, but it would decrease, the distractions, I think.
Oh, absolutely. For sure. And, listen, I enjoy taking pictures when I go out to these events. You mentioned you were at the Players on Saturday. I was at the Cognizant on Saturday as well. I was snapping some photos throughout the day, but never when somebody was actually getting ready to hit a shot. I took some just generic course photos just to have for myself, and maybe I snapped a picture of a golfer here and there. But it was either when they were standing with their caddy or maybe they were walking. It wasn't at a time where there was any actual real action happening to either distract them or to distract myself from actually watching the golf shots, happen themselves.
Totally fine. I mean, same thing. Like, we were out, we took pictures, but nowhere near the ropes, I think is the best way to put it. That's the best way, just nowhere near the ropes,
Yeah. But no, so getting into that a little bit, I figured we could have some fun here, just kind of talking about our experiences at our respective tournaments. I know that, there are a lot of people listening that have been to professional golf events, and there's many more out there that have not, whether they live in an area that the tour doesn't come to, or they just haven't gotten out to one. So, just talking a little bit about our experiences out there. So, like I mentioned, I was out at Moving Day Saturday at the Cognizant. First off, for where it is on the schedule now, and obviously with the way things are, it's not getting the big names that it used to get. I was fortunate enough that I did not have to pay for my tickets for Saturday. Had I had to, I don't know if I would have gone. The prices they are now charging out there for single day, just generic grounds tickets are just, to me, outrageous. And I think that was reflected in the number of people that were out there on Saturday. In years past, I usually go most years on Saturday. It's usually a zoo. It's usually tough to get around. That was not the case this year. I don't know. And Rory was playing, obviously, with Live Now. A lot of the big names aren't playing, not because they don't want to, because they can't, because they're all on Live Now. The DJs, the Brookses, even the Lee Westwoods and some of those other guys who live in the area, who used to play, even if they're not quote unquote in their prime anymore, they may still get a crowd here and there just for being relatively local. So you did miss a lot of those guys out there. The crowds were a lot more sparse. Even I noticed watching on TV come Friday afternoon, usually in the past, the Bear Trap there on 17 would be packed. There were a lot of empty seats from the TV cameras were showing. And then a lot of the people that are out there on Saturday, which, I mean, I don't blame them, they were following Rory. So if you didn't really care about following Rory, the course was pretty wide open, which for somebody like me, I was happy with that because I don't need to follow Rory for every shot. I want to see as much golf as I can, as close as I can. So that was actually kind of nice for me. I did catch Rory when he came through on 10 because I spent some time behind 10 fairway or 10 tee box. I spent a little bit of time on 17 over more towards the green, though, so I did get to see his group come through on 17 as well, and I got to see him make that absolute mess out of 16 because where he hit it in the water, where the grandstands that I was at on 17, you could see through to that exactly that little water area where he couldn't get out of. So you did get to kind of see that as well too. You know, my biggest reactions I think were one, I was surprised at how tame the Bear Trap was. Usually that's the area where everyone gets crazy. Now, granted, I was not on the hospitality side of the Bear Trap this year. I was just in the kind of the general area, but even over there, people weren't getting too rowdy. There were plenty of people that were hanging out there. They were just kind of doing their thing, and the golf tournament was on in the background. I will say that I think that everyone who was there, even if they weren't there specifically to watch the golf, they did show the respect that they should. By that I mean, you know, when I was hanging out there, there was a tent behind on the 10 tee box. You know, obviously most of the people in there were not really paying a ton of attention to the golf, but when the golfers came to the tee box and they were getting ready to tee off, everyone did, for the most part, get quiet. I wouldn't call it completely silent because I don't know if you'll ever get it completely silent, but they were quieting down to let those guys tee off, and then they were getting back to their conversations and their food and whatnot. There was one, and I know you told me that you noticed something similar when you were at the Players. There was one tent that was off of 17, and I'm not really sure. Now, granted, I didn't go up there, but I'm not really sure if you could have actually seen anything on the golf course from there. And there were a ton of people up there, and I don't think they really cared, but their view of 17 was being blocked by the giant grandstands, and maybe they could get a glimpse of 18 tee box depending on if they were standing in a certain area. But it was odd to me because it was clearly an area where there was no real vantage point of any golf, and there were still plenty of people that were hanging out in there doing their thing without any real ability to see live golf going on. Other than that, though, yeah, I had a great time. Like I said, I actually enjoyed the fact that it was a little bit of a more sparse crowd. It allowed me to see more up close and to do more and not have to fight amongst the people that were just not really there to do anything but just hang out and get in my way, so to say, which was nice. So, so, you know, go ahead and talk a little bit about what your experience was like on Saturday there at the Players.
Yeah, sure. So I'll touch on the non-golf viewing section first. Sawgrass it's grown and evolved so much. You know, I'm lucky enough to have been going to the Players for most of basically since 1994, 95. So I've seen the golf course go from, you know, a clubhouse that was built in the 80s that was made out of like, you know, slabs of wood to this mammoth $35 million monstrosity. And, you know, even number one, they had railroad ties as a grandstand, and now it's, you know, it's built up. So it's all grown, and that's great. It's the home of the PGA Tour now and all that stuff. There's an entrance that comes in basically behind 17T, and that's where the fan shop is. There's like, you know, local restaurants that come out and set up tents and all that, and you can get food and obviously do some shopping. There's a replica of 17. All that is really cool. But then it's just an area where it's just open air. It's not a special chalet. It's not something that you have to pay for. It's just people that want to sit down and eat or drink, and you're watching it on a Jumbotron. It confuses me because there's 18 holes of golf where you can follow and walk around and actually see those players for real.
You're actually there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're actually there.
and, you know, but I get it. Like if, you know, you got kids or you've already been walking around and you want to go chill for a bit, like I totally get it, but it's still just, it's such a massive area and it's such a big it's right when you walk in too. So like most of the, unless you have like preferred entrance or you're going into the clubhouse, which is, I would say probably 2% of the population of the fans, you're coming in from this back entrance. So it's almost like you get caught there for a bit. So I don't understand it, but it's there. And, and then we went, it was myself, my girlfriend, and another couple. And then we walked to behind number 4 green, which is a really fun spot. You're up on a hill. That green is fantastic Pete Dye design. There's, tons of undulation. It's a tough shot. The approach shot, you're either in the bunker right, and you got to carry water, and the pin was in the front. I mean, I would say the landing area is about as big as the table that I'm sitting at right now, to where you can actually have a chance at birdie. So I saw some really awesome and creative up and downs from guys like Tommy Fleetwood, Adam Scott, came through there. But those are big names. Those are international superstar players, and they probably had 100 people following them, 150 people following them. Granted, they were off relatively early. This was probably 10:30 or 11 o'clock, maybe noon. But it just wasn't that vibe that you would expect from the 5th major, right? And so we did have some access to some hospitality. I've got friends in some high places, and being a local for a long time, I made some requests and they were granted. It was my birthday also. So, so we went in, we ate, we sat by 17 for a while. Then, my intent was to walk around and see the golf course. It was the first time my girlfriend had ever been to a golf course, let alone a golf tournament. So that was one of the things that it was on my agenda to get out and see as much of the course as possible. Plus, I knew I was coming on this podcast, and I couldn't say I just sat at 17 all day. But
you could have. I've done it.
But so we walked, to some of the holes. We walked by 15 and saw some people on 16 green. But again, there's so many grandstands now that the accessibility to a normal person to be able to stand around and watch golf, especially in the, I would call it high volume areas, it's just not there. Like, you can't get 20 rows of people up on that hill by 16 green anymore because there's a grandstand there. And that used to be a great place to sit and watch. You could watch people come into 16 on their approach shot. Then you could kind of see them hitting on 17. So that was like a good place to hang out. Can't do that anymore. So we walked over to 13 green, which is, and again, there's another grandstand at 13 which I don't even understand why people would want to sit there. You're kind of off to the, I guess if you're coming from the tee box, you're on the right side of the green. Can't really see the tee shot. It doesn't really do a lot, but it's a giant hospitality tent. But so we sat behind there. It was the other par 3 on the back 9. And then, the guys are walking right past us and going to play 14, which I think is the hardest hole on the golf course. If you take wind out of the equation, is playing 484, par 4, trouble on both sides, these giant moguls on the right, and bunker and water left. So, guys really grind over that tee shot. So again, that's something as a golf fan, that's what I want to see. I want to see what these guys are doing, how they're strategizing it. Are they going to cut it off the water? Are they going to hook it off the moguls, or if you're left-handed, vice versa? And those are the types of things where, again, I'm with somebody that knows nothing about the game, and I get to have a conversation and educate that person about, this is what they're thinking. Like, this is what they're trying to do. They set up on this side of the tee box, so it opens up this side of the fairway. And that's fun for me because it builds kind of a commonality with somebody that I'm enjoying, being at a golf tournament with. So, we sat there for about an hour, and, then it was as the heat rose to, mid 80s and the humidity was out. Luckily there was no wind, so the humidity just stuck around. We made our way back to 17, and, our plan was, and the way I like to watch golf, even if I'm attending the event, is when the leaders come out, like, I kind of want to check in on them, but I want to watch all the moving and shaking on TV because you do get to see so much more. Yep. If you're watching it on TV than hearing the roars. I think the only place that it's fun to hear the roars is Augusta. They actually call it bird watching. Like, the people try to call what just happened based on where the roar was and all that stuff.
It's why I don't like going out to tournaments on Sundays. It's why I want to go either Friday or Saturday. Come Sunday, I want to be sitting on my couch watching it all unfold on TV.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, it's like having 4 TVs on at once if you put it in perspective. But no, and then getting back and watching the leaders, it was seeing what Scotty did. Knowing that he was in pain, like his caddy basically. I don't know if you saw this. His caddy told his wife on Friday, I don't even know if we're going to be able to finish the tournament. That's how much pain he was in. So the fact that he gritted it out and kind of hung around on Saturday, and Wyndham and Xander, they probably could have separated themselves a little bit more than they did. The other thing about it, 21 under par does not need to happen ever again at the Tournament Players Championship. I do not agree with. And somebody said something that the sub air might have been broken, and it was like a multi-million-dollar fix, and they didn't have enough time to do it, but. The sub-air system at Sawgrass, it can literally suck all the moisture out of the ground and firm up the greens fast. That did not happen. So, these guys are we talked about it on the last podcast. I don't enjoy a birdie fest. And those greens are tough. Like, regardless if they're soft or firm, putting them and reading them, it's difficult. So hats off to those guys. That's why they get paid millions of dollars to do what they do. But
the same thing happened at the Honda or the Cognizant, too. Yeah. I mean, they turned 10 from a long par 4 that would traditionally play over par into what became a short par 5, and everyone was just firing away at it. And it was just, I was joking about it all leading up and during the weekend on Twitter. Anytime I would tweet anything about the Cognizant, I would always finish it with the hashtag not my PGA National, because they basically and I did not lose. It was interesting. It did not get lost on me the irony of the fact that this was the first year that the PGA Tour took over managing the tournament. And so, of course, the Tour is going to make the course easier, just like they did with and it's just like the whole appeal of the Honda, now Cognizant, was that 7, 8, 9, 10 under par was going to win it. It was going to be a really good score. It was going to beat you up. It was going to give you a real test and prep for the Masters, and now it just became let me just dink and dunk this thing around and shoot 20 under par, and it's like I don't want to see that.
I think they're trying to do that with a lot of places to attract more of the people that are kind of looking to take a week off or maybe go work on their game before a bigger tournament. They're trying to make some of these other events, hey, there aren't many consequences to an errant tee shot, or it's easier to get up and down than it may have been a few years ago. So that's where we're at. I will say, the way when I saw Scotty, and I was playing golf Sunday morning, and then I heard about Scotty's eagle on 4. And if I was a betting man, I would have bet on him right there, because it's just, you could see the way, like, Xander is going to be a consistent top 10. But if you have an 8-footer, and it happened on 17 on Sunday, if there's an 8-footer that Xander Schauffele needs to make, he's going to miss it. And it's unfortunate, but it's the truth. And so, you see Wyndham kind of like, I don't know what was going, I don't know how that happened between from Friday to Saturday. It was like, oh crap, I'm 2 days away from $5 million and the biggest win of my career, other than the U.S. Open, right? But I just think that the weight of the tournament got to those guys, and it didn't get Scotty. But seeing that Wyndham was struggling with his game more than Xander was, and he kept it together. Like, I think if Wyndham was hitting the shots that Xander was hitting, he would have won the tournament. But that shot he hit on 17 on Saturday, which is one of the worst shots I've ever seen a PGA Tour player hit. I know we're going to talk about Malnati in the Valspar where he cold topped one, but 125 yards, I think it was playing. He had a gap wedge in his hand, and he just laid sod over it and hit it about 105. And to see him completely reset, put his club back in his bag. He didn't change clubs. He put the club back in the bag, started his routine all over again, pulled the same club out, pegged it back up, and put it to 8 feet and made the putt for bogey. That was a testament to the work he's done on his mental game. I know we're going to get into that in a little bit, but that's that's where I think this next level of PGA Tour player, there's nobody like Tiger anymore. All these guys wanted to be Tiger and be these mental, masters, and none of them have that capability because they've all already become millionaires and they don't have that drive. Nobody's going to win 15 majors anymore. Nobody's going to win 80 times. But to see what Wyndham has done from a mental standpoint, and I mean, the fact that he almost buried that putt on 18 to move it into the extra time with Scotty, and that power lip out, I mean, that was cruel.
It was in. Like, it actually went in. I took a screenshot of, and I posted, I was like, this ball did not go in the hole. And it was when it was, literally,
I think it was 85%. I think it was 85% in.
Yeah, all you could see was, that much of the ball because the rest of it was in, and then it somehow lipped back out.
Yeah. And, I mean, that putt, I thought he was going to miss it low side because a lot of people have been missing it low side, and that putt's kind of hard. It's hard to believe it breaks that much. But yeah, I mean, hats off to Scotty. I love Scotty Scheffler. I like what he stands for. I like his humility, but I do think Wyndham is right there in terms of the moment doesn't get too big for him because he doesn't really care about what the moment brings him, right? Like, he's in the moment to win. He wants to be the best player in the world. And I think it's right. He's right there. And the fact that you have back-to-back elevated events at Bay Hill and the Players. Bay Hill obviously had a smaller field. The Players had a huge field. But to have those two guys rise to the top in both those events, I mean, it's kind of going to – I'm hoping that's the rivalry that we've been looking for basically since Tiger and Phil. To have these guys duking it out in majors, duking it out at big-time tournaments, that's something that I'm really excited to see because both of their games are outstanding. And, the work that Wyndham's put in. Scotty came up, and we all knew who he was. Nobody really knew who Wyndham Clark was, and now we do. And I think we're going to continue to know that for a while.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Real quick, and then we're going to continue this Wyndham Clark conversation. You mentioned the replica on 17. Fun story really quick. I actually made a hole-in-one on that replica with Brooks Koepka standing right next to me. So
nice.
Story for another time, but it was a year when I was covering the tournament, and they had a little media event. You could go out, and Brooks was doing it. I think Michelob Ultra was the sponsor at the time that was hosting the little thing, and we went out and hit shots with him. And yeah, so I made, I don't count it as far as a hole in. I still don't have a real hole in one in my life, on an actual golf course, but I guess the closest I've ever gotten was I made the little hole in one on the little replica there. So,
that's funny.
But you mentioned Wyndham Clark, which is a perfect transition into our next little topic of conversation here. Season 2 of Full Swing on Netflix came out a couple weeks ago. I think we're at a point now where we don't have to drop a spoiler alert. I think if anyone who was going to see it has seen it by now. Spoiler alert, just in case you haven't seen it and still want to, skip this portion. But we can only wait so long in this modern day and age. Sorry, not sorry at the same time. Yeah. Wyndham Clark, definitely one of the stars, if you will, I think, of season 2, along with Ricky Fowler, and once again Joel Damon. Joel Damon, actually, that episode involving Wyndham Clark, that was the same episode, and I want to take we'll talk about the entire season as a whole, but I want to take a minute to dive specifically into that episode, because that episode specifically really shined a light just on what these guys go through mentally, week in and week out, playing on the PGA Tour. For us at home, it's really easy for us to say, oh, these guys have the life. They get to travel to all these fun places and get to play these exclusive golf courses, and they get to play them in pristine condition, and they get free clubs, and they get free balls and all this stuff. But on the flip side of that, they're traveling almost every single week, which means they're not in their homes. And you think about just you and your daily life. If you had a job, and a lot of people do, but if you had a job that required you to be on the road more than half of the year, it would take its toll on you. And then in the case of specifically of somebody like Joel Damon, who there's no reason, let's face it, and this is no knock on Joel. I love Joel. I think he's awesome. I think we all fell in love with him in season 1, which is why this particular episode was so great. His caddy, Gino, just from what we've seen on these Full Swing, sweetest man ever, I would die for that man. He is the most loyal person on God's green earth. Find you a friend like yes. Joel has with Gino. Just do that in life. Please do so. But you have a guy like Joel Damon. He has no business being anybody. Nobody should know who he is. People like you and I shouldn't even really know who he is. He's not a star in the standpoint of his performance on the course. He is the literal dictionary definition of a rank and file guy. Like, if you looked up at rank and file in the dictionary, his face would be there. He finishes middle of the pack every year as far as FedEx Cup points go. He's got to grind to get into the majors. He doesn't win tournaments. But I think because he is that everyman, I know because he is that everyman, everybody fell in love with him in season 1 of Full Swing. And so now he is somebody who, and he said it himself, nobody should know or care who I am. And now he's sitting there missing cuts, having to stay to sign autographs for 100 people because everybody knows and loves him now. And he hit a breaking point this last season with just how popular he became, and in his mind, for not legitimate reasons. And we saw that it absolutely took his toll on him. His caddy basically was like, you need to go and talk to somebody about this. Like, I'm walking if you don't go talk to somebody about this. And then, of course, we transition into somebody like Wyndham Clark, who has already almost done. He's already ascended to the top of his profession in a very, very quick amount of time, at a very young age. He's been very open about his struggles and his mom dying and everything. And he also has now started working with a sports psychologist. And so it was really interesting to see two golfers on two such opposite ends of the spectrum as far as success in their professional life not come together, but both need somebody to be there for them from a mental health and a mental coaching perspective.
Yeah, I think, the dichotomy of the episode, I mean, that's why, those filmmakers are so successful, is because they know what they're doing. But the fact that they pieced that together the way that they did was fantastic. This is the Victory Over Vices podcast. Like, people have problems, and it doesn't discriminate against, whether you're making $10 an hour or $10 million a day. And the willingness to accept help is one of those things that it becomes a survival instinct, right? Like, you're either going to take it or you're not. And I think it juxtaposed those two guys, and it showed what it did, right? Like, Wyndham Clark rose to the point where he won the U.S. Open after working with a sports psychologist and the visualization tools that he had. And then Joel Damon is sitting there, not only was he missing cuts, he was drinking too much. His wife was mad at him. He wasn't hanging out with his newborn kid. I think the breaking point happening and having that caught on camera was beautiful.
Oh, on the airplane when they're just crying at each other, basically. And they're like saying, I hate you through tears, but I love you at the same time. It was amazing.
Yeah. And, props to him for allowing himself to be that vulnerable. And I think he even said, he's like, oh, of course we have to do this while the Netflix cameras are here. But, I think he is a real person, and they all are. And, Joel lost his mom, and he went to therapy, and therapy didn't work for him. So he had this preconceived notion that therapy was never going to work for him, and he's just got to figure it all out on his own. And, I look at the game of golf. It is 90% mental. There's a lot of people, that have the ability to go out and shoot 4 straight days in the 60s. There are. But they don't have the mental capacity to be able to do it week after week, be isolated as much as they are. I felt it the first time I ever, the first time I ever drank by myself, like went to a liquor store and got booze and sat in a hotel room and drank by myself, was after losing in a playoff in a qualifier. And I was like 23 years old, so I related to that a lot just from a personal standpoint. But at the same time, I'm rooting for Joel. Like, I want him to win. Because of his unintentional rise to fame, that he deserves to be rewarded for the effort that he's putting in. And it doesn't happen overnight. Just like fame doesn't happen overnight, like healing and finding a solution and all those things doesn't happen overnight either. And you got to be willing to kind of trudge through the mud to get to where you want to be. And I'm glad he did. it. But to the Wyndham aspect of it, like, when I was playing, I had a sports psychologist. It was kind of part of the coaching program that I was in. You know, it was affiliated with the money that I spent to have the coach that I had, and it was kind of wonky to me. So I can definitely relate to not being able to kind of grasp what they're trying to tell you. But at the same time, there are still things that I learned from this guy that I still think about on the golf course today. And I haven't played competitively in, over a decade, well, more than a decade. So, that episode, I think it should just open the eyes of everybody that's watching it to these guys struggle. They're playing golf for 5 hours a day. They're, if you want to count warm up and workout, maybe 7 or 8 hours of a day for 4, 5, 6 days a week. But then there's the rest of their life that they have to handle, and it's tough. And I think, again, back to it happened with Tiger. Tiger had other things that were grappling at him and trying to bring him down. And he ultimately succumbed to it. But
I think we all remember 2000. Yeah, I think we all remember 2009. Anybody who's a golf fan remembers 2009. So
yeah. So that's kind of the point of all this, is all these people are human, and I think that we as a society have this almost lack of understanding that the people that we watch on our screens have the same emotions and emotional responses that you and I do. I had a garage full of broken clubs. That's how bad my temper used to be when I played, up until the point where I got to start playing golf for fun. And now I play golf for fun. And if I had the mental outlook I have now and the physical ability I had 20 years ago, we might be having a different conversation today. And that's a lot of the guys that I know that, went to college for it and tried to do it. And, now they're in sales like I am. So,
yeah. No, I think, and I really appreciated the fact that Joel took the time to talk about how he did try therapy once and it didn't work, so he just assumed that it would never work. Because it is a reminder for everybody out there, whether you play sports or not. Sometimes it can take 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times to finally get therapy to work, because it's all about the right therapist and everything kind of clicking. So it is a great reminder that if you've tried therapy and it didn't necessarily work the first time, it doesn't mean it'll never work. Just maybe that therapist just wasn't the right therapist for you. And that's not a knock on any therapist out there. It's just that for whatever reason, something didn't click. So go try another one. It's an important reminder out there for that. It's also was interesting to me that he was talking about, or that you mentioned, his vulnerabilities, and that he opened up on that episode. I think that's because he also opened up about his vulnerabilities in season 1. And I think that's the big reason why everyone fell in love with him and why he became so famous, that now he's also being vulnerable about here in season 2, because he opened up in season 1 about him battling cancer and about everything going on with his mom dying and things going on in his personal life. And I think it made it so everyone could relate to this guy because, A, he wasn't a Rory McIlroy. And on top of that, he was the closest thing to just a regular dude like the rest of us that is out there on tour. And so immediately everyone was like, yeah, I like this guy. This dude's my guy. Which brings me another, I think, along those similar lines, Ricky Fowler was another episode that I really, really loved. And I think it's another example of he hasn't had the greatest career as far as the amount of hype and he's gotten in the commercials he gets, but he is that dude. He is the dude that's out there. He's just being a dude playing golf, and everyone can kind of relate to that. It doesn't help that when he was coming up, he had that kind of boy band look during that boy band phase of society.
The golf, so obviously the golf boys.
The golf boy, yeah, exactly. So obviously that, but his vulnerabilities, I think, in his episode were really great. His wife was awesome. The fact that she was basically like, yeah, I didn't even really know he was a golfer when I met him, and it's just like she doesn't know anything about golf and couldn't care less about it. And I like that dynamic too. I'll tell you what, I really wish, and maybe it'll happen. I hope that the folks over at Netflix do maybe some sort of spin-off series where we just follow the wives and the girlfriends, because I feel like in season 1 and season 2 they all kind of stole the show. Like Paulina's Gretzky was great again. Brooks Koepka's wife was great again. Scotty Scheffler's wife in season 1, fantastic. Even even Keegan Bradley's wife and Zach Johnson's wife. I don't know. I think we need to get some sort of spinoff with just the wives of these tour guys, because their stories, and they don't even touch the surface. They're just kind of ancillary figures in these episodes. But their stories, I would imagine, have to be amazing as far as just not just what they deal with on a daily basis while their husbands are off at work, quote unquote, but just like the stuff they see out there. It's got to just be great storytelling, I would have to imagine.
Yeah, and it's a full-time job for them too. Like especially
of course,
once they start a family and stuff like that. So props to them.
Absolutely. What any other takeaways you took from that season 2 as a whole?
Man, I could do a full season on the Ryder Cup.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you what, man, as if I wasn't already bummed enough for Keegan for not getting that call, man. Also, on the other hand, as if Zach Johnson didn't already look bad enough in real time as far as the actual 4 days of the Ryder Cup and how that played out. Dude, it didn't get any better for him when they took us behind the scenes. Like, oh, that was just... Yeah, I'll tell you what. At times I felt guilty crapping on him during the Ryder Cup itself. No, he deserved. If anything, we might have gone too easy on him on the way that whole thing played out.
Yeah, and back to the mental capacity of what it takes to be a successful professional golfer. I mean, you could kind of see him crack. I mean, he was cracking after day one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
you know? And I think Zach's a good guy, and all that. But you think about it, Phil would have been captain this year if he didn't go to Live. And I think it would have been a completely different environment. I didn't really like that, at the Open Championship, there was the whole scene where Zach's having dinner with Ricky and JT and Jordan, and then those three guys end up being the captain's pick, and Keegan kind of knew. I'm not the biggest Keegan Bradley fan, but after seeing that and the way, I'll tell you what, watching him root on the U.S. with his kids, watching it on TV.
Good for him.
And, maybe that was forced because it was on Netflix and the cameras were there. But, overall, I think he showed a lot to me.
Yeah, like I said, that's what I'm saying. I think that at times I was wondering if we were maybe being unfair to Zach Johnson in real time. After watching those episodes, I feel like we weren't hard enough on him. Like if I had known that, I think I would have been way harder on him when he was cracking under the pressure. After day one, it immediately my response would have been, "You did this to yourself, guy." Like we didn't know it at the time, but he 1000% did that to himself. So and he has absolutely nobody to blame for himself for that.
Agreed.
Real quick here, we're already going a little long. I got a couple of other things, including previewing the Masters here. We want to talk super fast, just recapping the rest of the Florida swing. You mentioned Scotty winning the Players, going back to back. He did win the week before at Bay Hill. We didn't even talk about who actually won the Cognizant, and that was Austin. Eckroat won it. Peter Malnati, you mentioned winning at the Valspar last week. I think those two guys right there are two prime examples of why this tour is doing itself no favors by continuing to emphasize these closed, limited field, no-cut signature events because it's preventing more stories like this from happening. I think that it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Peter Malnati here because he is a policy board member. He just won this tournament, which means he's now in all these signature events. He's in all the majors now. Will his mindset change? Will he start thinking more like the Rorys of the world and saying, yeah, keep him closed off? Kind of almost like what Wyndham has done now. Now he's in and he's like, yeah, we don't need, or will he continue to keep fighting for the rank and file? So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I do find it ironic a little bit that Peter Malnati wins this last week while we're deep into March Madness in the basketball tournament. He's almost like the Yale, if you will, or the Oakland of the pro golf world. So, that's kind of fitting the timing of March Madness. And then he goes and wins as well at the Valspar.
Yeah, real quick, I think Austin Eckroat's one of those guys where, like I said, the parity in golf now is so massive that you've got a guy that shot 29 at the U.S. Open and finished top 10, and nobody's really heard of him. Knowing a little bit about him, like he played at Oklahoma State, which is a powerhouse, and his coach said he's one of the best golfers to ever come through there, and that's very high praise. And Malnati, just being the journeyman, he hadn't won in 9 years, and a lot happens in everyone's life in a decade, but the fact that he could share that with his family and kind of show that emotion is something that I'm looking forward to continuing to see what he does moving forward. And I hope he sticks to his guns. I hope he keeps fighting for the quote unquote little guy. And, because golf, if nobody's going to separate themselves, then they shouldn't be separating themselves. That's the point of all this. If nobody's going to come out and say, hey, I'm the guy. And I think Scotty is that, but there's nobody else. So until somebody else comes out and you've got 5 or 6 guys that are consistently just battling it out, we need as many opportunities to see these types of stories as possible.
Absolutely. And we talk about loyalty with Joel and his caddy Gino. Peter Malnati and loyalty with his caddy as well too. I mean, they have gone through it the last basically 7 or 8 years. When I lived in Jupiter, Peter Malnati's caddy was we lived in the same neighborhood. I had a lot of opportunity to sit and chat with him, and so he couldn't be a nicer guy. Peter couldn't be a nicer guy. It was great to see him finally come through and win one like that, especially with just, I mean, that leaderboard was now great. I understand he was only 2 back going into Sunday, but so was half the field. I mean, that leaderboard was incredibly congested. It's not like, he had a lot of guys he had to fight through. Obviously, it didn't hurt that Keith Mitchell just flamed out basically right out of the gate and was nowhere to be found the rest of the day. But, it's not like he was just had nothing. Sunday came around, he had a 15-shot lead, and he just kind of limped it. I mean, he had to go and earn every minute of that victory there.
Yeah.
Come Sunday. One quick other note, topic to bring up before we get into our Masters preview, and this actually wasn't on the rundown, so I'm going to throw something out here to you without prepping. But it's been in the news all week this week, especially the last couple of days, with Shohei Ohtani with Major League Baseball, and then yesterday it came out with Jonte Porter in the NBA, both pretty significant gambling and betting scandals. Obviously, Shohei, we don't know if he had any involvement. He's saying he doesn't have any involvement in it. Jonte Porter, same thing at the moment, but he's being investigated because there were some pretty odd betting things going on. So my question for you is it only a matter of time until we see our first significant betting scandal in golf? I know we've had one. I know we had one with some Korn Ferry Tour guys last year. They bet on golf events that they weren't participating in. They're Korn Ferry Tour guys, so they weren't really, nobody really knew who they were. But with the way sports betting is going, is it only a matter of time until the tour finds itself dealing with a betting scandal?
Man, that is a tough one to be put on the spot with. Humans are humans. So I think eventually the way that gambling in this country is going and everybody has access to it, even in Florida now, you can gamble.
Right here. You don't even need to go anywhere to do it. Right on your phone.
Yeah. So I think it'll happen. I don't know when. I don't know who. I'm not gonna go out on a limb and say, Austin Eckroat's going to hedge his next event, or anything like that. But no, I don't know that. But I think it's only a matter of time. I mean, you saw it with, you saw Phil have some gambling issues. You saw John Daly have some gambling issues. I know Tiger used to hang out with Michael Jordan and Charles Barkley, and they love to gamble. So these guys like to gamble if they have the access to do it. Somebody's going to make a mistake. I don't know who it is. It could happen. I mean, it could happen on the Asian tour or something like that. I don't know if it's going to be the PGA Tour, but like I said, humans are humans. So somebody's going to slip up.
All right. Well, I guess we'll see when, if, when, and where that all happens. And now the moment everyone has been waiting for, Masters here. So we are recording this on the eve of the Houston Open, which means we've got 2 weeks to go to the season's first major, and that is the Masters. It will be the first time in 2024 that we see LIV guys and PGA Tour guys tee it up at the same event. And that's the deal now these days. We see them 4 times a year. This will be the first one. Let's just get right to it. Who do you like in the Masters?
Scotty.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm not even going to say anything else. Scotty.
So, let me say this. I'm hoping it's Scotty and either Brooks or Rahm dueling it out. That's. I will not leave my couch if that's the case. So for those that follow me outside of Victor Vices and may follow me in some of my other podcasting work that I do in the golf world, I feel like I don't want to contradict myself or get caught up in saying, oh, well, you said this guy in one of your shows and this guy in a different one. So I will tote the company line, so to say. I said before the season started that Victor Hovland will win at least one major this season. So I feel like until he does it, I'm going to have to pick him for every major until he finally wins one. So I will go Victor Hovland just so I'm not getting caught contradicting myself. Beyond that, though, yeah, I think it would be awesome for Scotty to win. Of course, there's always in the back of my mind, there's always a hope that Rory finally locks up the career Grand Slam and gets his green jacket too. Regardless, for every year, I'm going to be jealous that I'm not there, and I'm going to be particularly jealous that I'm not in that Champions Dinner because John Rahm's menu looks phenomenal.
Yeah.
Not that everyone's menu every year doesn't always look amazing, but something about doing that Spanish cuisine just got my mouth watering when I saw that menu. So once again, it's the toughest dinner invitation to get in the world. It's the one that's most coveted, that everybody wants, that nobody can get, and it is that obviously for a reason, because it is the Masters Champions Dinner. So that'll I think we've pretty much hit every of the major topics of discussion that have been happening basically in golf since we sat down last, and we did it in a much more enjoyable fashion.
Yeah.
We didn't just sit there and just say everything sucks and this is awful. We actually got to talk about some fun things and some enjoyable things and some more lighthearted things this time around.
I enjoyed it, and I'll continue to enjoy it. Thanks a lot, Dan.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on with us again.
All right. We'll see you.
All right, that'll do it for today's show. Thank you once again to Chipper for sitting down and talking some golf with me. As always, just a friendly reminder to everyone that if you like what you watched or you heard today, please continue to like, subscribe, rate, and review on our feeds, whether you're watching us on YouTube or you're listening to us on Spotify or anywhere else you may get your podcasts. And of course, please to continue to share with your friends, family members, and loved ones. If you think this is a good show, share it with them. Tell them, hey, check this show out. We think it's really cool. It'd be greatly appreciated, and it helps us grow and get our voices out in front of more people. Also, just a friendly reminder, too, that this show, Victor Revices, is just one of many shows that we have on the Addiction Help Podcast Network. We have our flagship show that I also host, the Addiction Help Podcast, so please go ahead and make sure to check that out if you haven't already. We're on season 2 of that podcast at the moment. And then we also have Lights of Recovery, hosted by the editorial director of addictionhelp.com, Jessica Miller, where she sits down and talks with those on their recovery journey about what recovery has been like to them and what kind of their life has been like both before and after they got sober. So please go ahead and continue to check out all the shows on the Addiction Help Podcast Network, and we continue to thank you, or we keep thanking you, of course, for your continued support. Also, speaking of addictionhelp.com, if you or a loved one is struggling, whether it be with mental health, substance abuse, addiction, please visit addictionhelp.com. There are great resource pages that can help you out, whether you want more information on certain ailments or you're looking for the best way to get started on the recovery process. All that can be found at addictionhelp.com, so please be sure to check that out as well. So that'll do it for today's show. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time. Have a good one, everybody.